Hi everyone, this is April Leon. Welcome to my channel.
Ooh, you miss me? I know.
To all my returning subscribers, thank you for always watching my videos. If this is your first time watching my video, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell icon, so when I release a new video you will be the first to get notified. Okay, so in this video we're going to be making this beautiful dress with a ruffle at the side and a puff sleeve. So if this is something you want to watch, stay tuned and watch to the end. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video. Thank you. So let's get right into the video. So we're going to go ahead and start with the down part, which is the skirt part of this dress. So I've gone ahead to mark a straight line, my starting point, and marked my hip line and then the length of this dress, which is 63, and I added 1 inch allowance to the bottom. So I've gone ahead to draw horizontal lines across my marked point. So I'll go ahead and divide my waist circumference into 4 at that point, and then I'm going to mark it there. I'm also going to add 1.5 inches allowance. I'm going to divide my hip circumference by 4 and I'm going to mark it at that point, and then I'm going to add 2 inches allowance. I'm going to go ahead also to minus 1.5 from my hip measurement divided by 4, and I'm going to add 1.5 inches allowance at that point. Then I'm going to connect my lines. Okay, so I'm going to connect from the bottom down to the hip. Once I'm done with that, I'm just going to go ahead and cut. So we're going to go over to cut the back pattern for the skirt. So I've gone over to place my front piece on the fabric. I'm going to go ahead now and then mark out all the lines on the front bodies, on the front skirt, which is the hip, the length and the waist. So I'm going to take out 1/2 inch on the hip. This is to allow the butt to sit properly on the skirt. So I'm going to draw my zipper line. I'm just going to use the skirt line to trace my zipper line, and once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and take in 1/2 inch on the waist. This will allow the waist to also, the back to sit properly, the skirt back to sit properly. So I'm going to connect it to the 1/2 inches I took out from the hip, and then I'm going to mark down there 10 inches from the hip, and I'm going to connect that line there. I'm going to also go ahead and mark the slit line at that point there. That will be my slit, and I'm doing an overlap slit. I'm going to make a full video on how to make a skirt and an overlap slit. Alright, so once I'm done with that, I'm just going to go ahead and mark my dart. I took 4.5, my nipple to nipple, and then I brought out 1 inch allowance for the dart, and so I connected it back to the waist. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and cut the pattern. So I went out to take the 1/2 inches I took inward before. I took it out from the zipper, so my zipper allowance will be equal, and then I'm going to continue cutting. So I'm going to place my lining on the sequin, and I'm going to add 1.5 inches below. The lining is 42 inches and the dress length is actually 63, so I added 1.5 inch for both the sewing and then for the complete dress. So once I was done with that, I went over to cut my upper bodice, and I'm starting off with the starting line. I'm going to go ahead and mark my bust point measurement, which is 11, my under bust measurement, which is 14.5, and then the half length, which is 17.5. So once I'm done marking that point, I'm going to use my ruler to draw a horizontal line across all the points that I've marked. So my lining was not enough, so I had to take my measurement upwards, since the up bodice is actually an off shoulder. So I'm going to use my ruler to draw a horizontal line across all the mark points. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and take my shoulder measurement divided by 2. I'm going to mark it and then come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and put the same measurement of my shoulder just to get a straight line, and then I'm going to mark my chest measurement at that point, which is 9 inches. Once I'm done, I'm going to rule a line across that point, and then I'm going to draw a straight line, which is my armhole line, and I'm going to connect my shoulder slant. I also divided my armhole measurement, which is 4.5, and then I'm going to go ahead and put my bust circumference divided by 4. I'm going to mark it at that point. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and mark my under bust round measurement by 4, and I'm going to mark it at that point. Okay, so do well to use your own measurement. This is my customer's measurement, so you can use your measurement for this. Go ahead and also measure yourself and divide your circumference by 4. So once I was done with that, I went ahead to put my nipple to nipple, which is 5 inches. My nipple to nipple is 9 divided by 2, which is 4.5. I added half inches, which is 5 inches. So I went ahead to mark a straight line at that point. Then I'm going to go ahead and mark 1.5 inches outward, and then mark half inches inward. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to use a ruler to connect those lines. We are trying to make the bustier. So I'm going to connect the line to the bust point, and then I'm going to make a curve. You can use your curve set if you have to connect that bustier. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and mark 6 inches. I later realized that this was just too high. If you want your off shoulder to be high, you can make it at 6 inches, but I brought it down so that she could show a little cleavage because she likes to. So I went ahead to mark the new over bust at 8 inches, and then I drew a straight line. So once I was done with that, I marked the nipple to nipple at that point, and then I took 1 inch outwards, 1 inch inward, and connected the bustier at the bust point. So once I did that, I went ahead to also mark my armhole curve at that point, and so I'm going to go ahead and add half inches for my sewing allowance at that point there. So then I'm going to mark a straight line connecting that half inch. Once I'm done with that, I'm just going to extend my bustier at that point, and then I'm going to also connect to my neckline. I'm making a sweet heart neckline. Is not too deep. Then I'm going to connect the bustier to the armhole. So I'm just making sure that I don't have any longer parts. If I have, I'm just going to extend the longer parts. That's why I'm measuring it. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and then add my allowance to that allowance to the bodice. So I'm going to take back that allowance, which is 1.5, and I'm going to add it back to the main bodice, and I did that at the bust point, the under bust, and the half length. I'm also going to extend the allowance I had there at the over bust. I'm going to take it out to the armhole, and then I'm going to connect it at that point. Okay, so once I was done with that, I went ahead to add my allowance, my sewing allowance, which is 2 inches at that point, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut. So I'm going to go ahead and mark my back bodice. I'm taking 1.5 inches for the zipper allowance. I'm going to use a ruler to connect it, draw a straight line at that point. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and take my measurements, my bust point measurement, my under bust measurement, and my half length measurement. I also drew the starting point. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and use my ruler to draw a horizontal line. I also marked the over bust, which is 8 inches. So I'm going to use my ruler to connect those horizontal lines. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and mark my shoulder measurement divided by 2, and I'm going to mark it at that point to get a straight line and my 1-inch slant. I'm also going to mark my armhole depth, which is 9 inches. Once I'm done with that, I'll go ahead and mark my bust circumference divided by 4 at that point. I'm also going to add a 2-inch allowance for my sewing allowance. I'm going to go ahead and also mark my under bust circumference divided by 4. I'm going to mark it at that point and add my 2 inches sewing allowance. I'll do the same for my waist, and then I'm going to add 2 inches allowance. Okay, so once I was done with that, I went ahead to take out 1/2 inch from my zipper. This is to prevent bulging at the zip, and then I marked my 5 inches that allowance. I later reduced it to 4.5 because it's the back bodice. So when I was done with that, I marked the same 4.5 inches, and then I connected it with the darts to make a dart leg. So once I was done with that, I went ahead to mark the dart allowance at the side of the bodice, which is 1 inch. Once I was done with that, I connected it, and then I also connected extended my armhole and then connected it at that point. Then I made the curve at the neck region of the back upper bodice. Once I was done with that, I went ahead to connect the 1/2 inch I took inward before to my zipper line. Okay, so once I was done with that, I also went ahead to check my zipper measurements and then also take out the excesses I have there. My zipper was 1.5, so I measured it and then connected the line, and I went ahead to cut my back bodice. Once I was done cutting, I went ahead to place my bodice on the sequin, and then I went ahead to cut. Once I was done with that, I went ahead to iron my fusible and my warding. This is all for the cutting video. Thank you for watching. I'm going to post the sewing tutorials, so if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe, so when I do that, you're going to get notified. Thank you for watching.